Hey, everyone, welcome to Office Hours. If you are in YouTube, you can click on a little link below and you'll get to Zoom. If you're in Zoom, you can click on a little link below and you can get to Mukana and you can ask questions and you can talk to other people and you can vote on questions. There's all kinds of things to do there. So we highly recommend it. If you think you can answer the questions, you'll see us answering questions and you think I can do better than that, then join us. We would love to have you on the panel. We have an incredible panel. It's constantly evolving and changing and getting better. And we'd love to have you become part of it. So you just have to be here a little earlier, 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you're not sure if you're ready, come at 6. We open the doors at 6 o'clock and you can come here and check out your setup, have us work with you a little bit if you need a little extra time to make sure that it's all working. And so come at 6. And then at 7 o'clock, of course, we start the general questions. Any question that you have around media or virtual production or production. And so if you have those questions, 7 to 8 is when we'll answer them. The best time to ask those questions is right at the top of the hour or even before the top of the hour. Second hour is always something that we think is worth talking about for an hour as opposed to just a question. And so today we got Ray Maxwell. He's going to talk about drones. So Ray's been doing a lot of drone work for a long time. And so he's going to share some of his wisdom with us. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the future of digital first events. So really thinking about what that looks like. On Friday, we're talking about what CDN to choose. Should you use Facebook or YouTube or many of the other ones. And so we'll talk about what that looks like. And then on Saturday, we're doing the future of education. We're doing education, then the future of education. Then we're going to go into a 3-hour breakdown of how the remotes did their videos. So it's going to be a long day on Saturday. It should be exciting. Anyway, so it's a busy week this week. I think each week is getting busier. So as we keep moving forward, and so it should be a lot of fun. All right, Bill, let's go ahead and take it away.
Diving into things, Chris Comfort here in the panel starts our first one out of New York, New York. When I play back a video file on my iPad Pro and HDMI dongle into an ATEM Mini, the audio is a mess. I'm guessing it's a mic line level mismatch. What are some possible workarounds?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah. Oh, Chris, since you're here, like, what do you mean by audio is a mess? Because when you're hooking up via HDMI, it's just a digital connection, so you don't really have
it's
mic
completely
or line
distorted
level to deal with.
It's distorted. When I try to test it I'm testing it through Zoom. That's it. But I sent it out on a Zoom meeting to a friend yesterday as a test. And he said it's completely breaking up. It's just distorted. It's crunching. It's cutting in and out, almost like it's overloading something. But none of the meters are overloaded at all. And I'm turning the input volume way down on my ATEM, or that input gain at the top, the round knob. I'm turning that way down. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff, and then Mickey.
So which HDMI input is this coming into? And is that where you're seeing the meters? And are you able to monitor the program out of the ATEM into an HDMI monitor where you can plug some headphones into and confirm if the audio is clean in the ATEM Mini?
I haven't done that yet. I mean, I could play something quickly and show you guys.
That sounds like a non-original audio Zoom problem if the audio is breaking up and cutting in and out.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just to tag along to what Jeff was saying, maybe try first, like, from your iPad, hook it up to a TV and see how it sounds there, or as Jeff mentioned, like something that you can plug headphones to. If that's okay, then within your computer, maybe fire up QuickTime and do a recording from there, from your ATEM going into QuickTime, and play that back. See if it's starting to distort. Essentially, try to figure out
PC,
where that.
But I can do probably OBS,
or
something.
Yeah, you can record on OBS.
And what I would do, I don't want to test it here because there's people with headphones. It could be really loud. No. But this is a perfect thing to do in the post-show or the pre-show, is to bring that stuff in and say, hey, I want to test this. And that's the kind of stuff we would absolutely love to work on. Go ahead, Jeff.
And coming in HDMI from an iPad, you should be on that input just at 0 dB. So you're looking for unity gain, and then you use the fader to set what the program level you want for the listener is. Mm-hmm. So you shouldn't need to make an adjustment there.
Yeah, it's a mess. Okay. Thank you.
Next question.
Hit me
Moving
up on Discord, Chris.
Moving on to Ray Franklin of Mount Dora. Thanks to Guy in the DVE store, my ATEM Mini Extreme arrives this week. Yay. And I have a few dozen macros that are important to my workflow. Can I import them into the new Extreme? And what do I need to watch for in the transition? Thanks.
I'm not 100% sure that they will address correctly. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm not seeing, I'm looking at the new Mini Extreme right now, and it just still has the macros as create, run. There isn't like a direct import here, so I think you could open up a project and maybe pull those in, but
You'd have to probably patch them into the XML. So you'd save them out from the macros here, and then you might have to cut and paste them into the XML to get them in.
Cool.
And even then, I wouldn't do that. So I would rebuild them. Like if I'm moving from one piece of hardware to another, I wouldn't be trying to move my macros from one. I just think you're going to end up with anomalies. You're better off just taking what you did and do it again. It's good practice. That's my recommendation. Next question.
Comes from JJ McKenna at Santa Venetia, California, and here on the panel often these days, maybe following up on Idelson's question of yesterday, how to create more diversity from Monday, how to prevent an overdriven echo chamber of biased information. Ooh, big question.
I don't know. I mean, we have a lot of different people with a lot of different backgrounds right now. I mean, not all different backgrounds, but we're coming in from a couple different countries. And I think that I think you have to be aware of it. But I think that especially in Discord, we have a very wide variety of people that are discussing things. So I think that that's the case, but you are going to have definitely some sided opinions in any community that, because the community will self-organize. So, like the people who dramatically disagree with what we're doing here or how we're approaching it aren't here anymore. So that's the and in the end that's kind of how communities self-organize, is that people you come in and they take on their own shape. Cities, states, countries all have their own piece, and so you can try to do that, but there's no way to truly be middle of the road. Go ahead, Bill.
I just think one of the things, and this is what we're doing here, is when you hear voices from a tremendous array of different perspectives, I think it suppresses that kind of bias growing. Right now, we are lucky. We now have friends, those of us who've been in office hours from a long time, for so many countries that we never would have imagined. And when you know somebody, if somebody tells you religion X is bad, and you suddenly realize that the guy you've been enjoying a conversation with for the past 10 months is of that religion, it suppresses that desire.
And I literally don't want to talk about religion here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Like ever, even use it as an example. So, and the reason we do that is to keep it out of the venue of anybody talking about it, because it's just religion and politics poison communities pretty quickly. And so, especially when they're diverse. And so they're, I'm not saying that religion and politics are bad. I'm saying that they just don't. We just want to. We spend a lot of time here doing is having it be a place where we see more of how we're alike than how we're different. So we just want to be super careful. And that's my attempt to be respectful of everybody's religion. So anyway, but I think that it would be naive to say that we're not biased. We're absolutely biased. We're absolutely doing production from a certain side. We come from a different background. We are, if we have a computer and a phone, we are wealthy. like compared to a lot of places that I work. So we have a very we definitely have a bias to what we're doing. We just have to acknowledge it, but there's no way to get rid of it. Like it's just to be aware of it as we go down that path. Go ahead, JJ.
And I was actually taking this into mind that in the 1920s, most of America's libraries were built by a gentleman who said that greatness is created by surrounding yourself with like-minded people. But at the same time, and I think that many of the trends that we see in our society and culture and the questions that are asked today that can become controversial, if we don't have enough input for the various kinds of inputs that exist out there, I don't think that the idea can become fully formed and thus sustainable in the long run for all of society. So that was kind of my question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important for people to express those things. Hopefully this is empowering everyone to express how they feel and what they look like, in the rest of the world. And this is kind of a neutral ground where we keep on figuring out technologically how to do it. Chris, and then John Edelson, and then Roscoe.
I think
John,
we always do.
I don't know if you had your hand up. I thought you had your hand up. Go ahead, Chris. We'll go pretty quickly and then we'll move on.
I think we always do a very good job of this, but I think that, when somebody says, how do I do X? And we all say, well, X isn't even the right way to approach it. I think the one thing we should always keep in mind is to try to answer the question that was asked as best we can, while also giving advice of here's how we would do X if that was our only option, but that's not even the best approach to do a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think we do a pretty good job.
No, we do a really good job of it. I think
Yeah.
but if we have that in the back of our mind every time, I think it'll be helpful.
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Technology by design is unbiased. There are best practices, and I think that's what we're aiming for, is best practices. The fact that we may use them to for specific messages here or there, we really don't discuss that a lot. We really do just stick with the technology, and I think that's going to be fine.
Yeah, John.
I was just saying, my goal is to get more people to the table, and I think if you have more diversity at the table, these things will work their way out.
I mean, part of why I built this is because I believe people have to be able to tell their own stories. Everyone needs to have the power to be able to project what they have, to show the rest of the world. I've built schools in Rwanda, and in Africa, and I've done work. I've trained all over the world, specifically so that people have the opportunity from their point of view to express it, and they're not basically clear cut by mass media.
What struck me on this, just real quick, is John Preto posts a picture of our screen every day in Facebook, and it's always male faces. And I think even that may prevent people from wanting to come, because that's what they see.
And all we can do is encourage women and other folks to join. I'm really not let's figure out how to force the issue. We just try to keep on figuring out how to make it a good place to do that. And we do have it in some of the verticals. Next question.
Andy Shaw of London's up next with any recommendations for reasonable priced in-ear headphones. I bought some cheap MEE Audio M6s from Amazon, which fit great, but the sound quality is poor. I don't mind spending up to $100. Many thanks to you all.
I know a couple people have some relatively inexpensive ones. I don't know. I know Jason usually has some that he likes. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I like these IE40 Pros by Sennheiser. There's a newer model. I just got an email notification that this one's now discontinued. So they're the ones that come with the stock Evolution Wireless in-ear 500 series. That's the receiver and the transmitter for bands and whatnot. It's probably one of the cheaper ones to get into, but $99 is about the price that you should pay for these ones. So IE40 Pro, and then look for the next generation.
Next question.
Moving on to Alex Golner, our friend from London. And Alex asks, what do you think of the new ARRI AMIRA live camera system that was revealed today? And he has a link for it.
It is, I haven't seen it. Anyone seen it? It just got released today. So it's hard. I was going to ask what people thought of the DJI when it got released yesterday. We're usually one day behind. Go ahead, Mickey.
Wow.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but I just say about time. The Amira has been out for a long time now, like what, 5-6 years, and yeah, it's amazing that ARRI only got to this now.
Yeah, so I think that we'll absorb it a little bit. We'll ask that question tomorrow when we actually have time to look at it. If it's done 5 hours ago, it's still pretty early for a lot of us, so we have to probably absorb some of that. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that. I mean, the color science on the chips is amazing, so I think it's pretty exciting. But I'm curious as to whether Live will invest in cameras that are that expensive for what they're doing. But it could happen. For some, it'll be a vertical market, and ARRI has been extremely successful everywhere else that they've done it. Against most of what I always look at ARRI like, wow, that's a lot of money, and I don't know how they're going to be successful, and then they are. I mean, if you look at all the films being produced. So I definitely think that there's an opportunity there. Go ahead, Bill.
If nothing else, you can say that it's a very powerful vote in favor of live camera operations, because if ARRI thinks that is a growing area that they can mine for the top end, that means that a lot of very important people are considering moving into more and more live production via the web.
Or, well, I think they're looking at broadcast, but yeah, I think that, I mean, you're not going to, that's not a web, it's not web budgets.
Is it all going to be one thing though? Is the stuff you produce for
at some point, but
the web,
not anytime. I mean, I think that the budgets for it, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think that's what they're aiming at though, is kind of high end broadcast at the moment, for those things. But I do think we're going to see a lot more live. I mean, I think that we've jumped 10 years through that process. So next question.
Alan Scott of New Brunswick, Canada is up next with audio test tone. What are its properties and how do I generate it? You should probably start with there's not just one.
Yeah, there's lots of audio test tones. Probably the most common is just a pure sine tone. And any of these, you can generate it from a signal generator, which comes as a plugin in a lot of workstations, but usually it's easier to just download a pre-created wave file. So a pure test tone allows you to set levels. It also is very easy to hear other stuff that comes in, distortion. So that's used for a total harmonic distortion plus noise measurement, THD plus N. But as humans, we can perceive distortion on a sine wave really easily because it adds additional harmonics that are not that signal. Pink noise is another one, which is noise that is balanced lows, mids, and highs. And then a sweep tone, which takes a sine wave and sweeps it from lowest frequency to highest frequency.
Go ahead, Mickey. Can you hear me, Mickey?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and just to add to that, a lot of consoles, a lot of actual hardware boards have signal generators in them.
Next question.
Chris Fenwick of Sacramento in here in the panel says, what's a good anonymous voting system for a meeting? Preferably something that works online, maybe even on a phone app.
I don't have an answer for that. I don't use anonymous voting systems. so I don't know. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Didn't we talk about this once before? And my opinion, and I think it's still there, is that anything that works via the net and doesn't have some sort of encryption or security features in between them is always going to be eligible for somebody who knows a lot about computers to hacking it and injecting votes.
I don't think it's so much hacking. I think it's just generally making it not openly available to it. I mean, I guess ours is somewhat anonymous, but not truly anonymous because the system sees everything. So I don't know. The fundamental problem for most online anonymous systems is that they're gamed very quickly. So if you're doing it for one event, you can probably get away with it. If you do it regularly, someone will game the system. Like that's that's how that works. And there's no way to get around it that we've seen.
And that was kind of my point, is that, here we're voting up and down questions. There's no back end. We're not doing a public vote on an initiative for a state or something where money might be changing hands. So this is, I think, easy.
No, I think he's looking for a specific event. I'm just saying that it isn't, generally, I mean, I understand that there are uses for anonymity, but anonymity generally damages conversations, like almost always. It's like why you can't really have it's why most of our clients turn the chats off on like YouTube. It's just because with the way it's set up, it's just worthless. It's just junk. This bile that lives in the internet comes out of the cracks of any major event and ruins your event. so that's why there's less bile in Facebook because everyone's got a name. But anonymity has its use. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's why we don't do it very much here. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I think what Chris is asking about, let's say there's a board meeting and somebody puts a nomination out or something like that, and they want to just vote, but they don't want, they want to vote anonymously. Yeah. I think that's what Chris is asking about. Yeah. And if there's a app or a website that does that.
Yeah. I don't know of one. Go ahead, Ken, and then Courtney.
Yeah, this is a kind of system that I build on WordPress websites. So there's a great plugin called Gravity Forms, which has a voting feature, and it logs IP addresses. So you could use that to stop people double voting, but it's something that you need to build really. I mean, it's quite easily done in WordPress with a plugin.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it's just tough to make anything truly anonymous because in order to lock out repetitive votes from one person, you've got to track an IP address or some type of identifier to make sure that that person doesn't vote more than once. So as a rule, it's impossible to do it without being gamed, as Alex says, and keep it completely anonymous that, someone can't figure out who's voting which way.
Guy?
Yeah, no, Chris was in the same meeting I was in when Future Media Concepts did their Final Cut sessions, and they use Slido, which has got some polling, and I would take a look at that and ask them what they thought of it. But sli.do is the website.
Next question.
Moving on, Charles Klein of New York City, and here on the panel often. Good morning. Thoughts on Netgear's audio video over Ethernet, switches, looking to expand my local network to 10G. Any other trusted options from the panel?
That came up yesterday, and I hadn't even heard of them. Having something that was specifically towards AV. So I actually am pretty interested in taking a look. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested as well. But what I currently use is a Ubiquiti Edge switch. That line in general has been pretty good, and also people are a fan of the Cisco switches as well.
Yeah, go ahead, JJ.
To further expand on yesterday's answer, which is starting at FS and then druthers is Cisco, like Mickey said, I think one of the things that can occur in a network is trying to make pieces of equipment that shouldn't do that job. A router should be a router and not a switch. A switch should be a switch, so that your infrastructure stays your infrastructure. Switches are built to switch, not to route information. They're entirely layer 2. So really anything that you get that does 10 gig backplane and can handle the amount of traffic will function as long as you don't try to make it do routing, because it shouldn't route.
Next question.
Nathan Nicholson of Wake Forest, North Carolina says, looking for recommendations for lighting. I have a set with a fairly low ceilings, about 2 feet of clearance above the set, and a fairly large area to cover for front lighting. And need something that will cover a good amount of space, but not take up camera positions, using newer panels for backlighting.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
I've mentioned the panels that I used before from LEDvance. They're very wide, like 30 centimeters tall, but they're only that thick. So depending on the angle you want your light to come from, if you could grab something like this and actually stick them to the ceiling, they won't take up very much space. But again, it depends on what angle you want the light coming from. If you want the light coming from in front, like I've got at the moment, it'll be fairly flat. If you want it above, the best way to describe what the light looks like from above is look at one of Taylor Swift's video clips, the one where she's pretending to not be able to dance and what have you, which was a lit floor and a lit ceiling, and it's kind of nice.
Go ahead, Bill.
Depends on the look you're going for, though. So in the olden days, when we used tungsten instruments, one of the things about tungsten, it was a very small source, and then you used lenses to project it out. And because of that small source, if you used a tool like a barn door or even some black wrap to put over it, you'll get a relatively sharp-edged cut. So you can do things like make a slash of light. You move into these LED panel arrays, they just don't work like that. 100 LEDs or 100 spotlights all shooting out. And if you try to put a cutter in front of them or some kind, you'll get really a stair-steppy kind of Venetian blind look. They just don't look the same. They are moving in the modern era to what are called chip-on-board LEDs, which is a single brighter LED that function more like those old tungsten lights and allow you more lighting control. If you want that kind of control, look for those. If you want to be able to shape light, do mood, do color, those are usually a much better area of approach than getting those big flat panels. The big flat panels are nice because they can do soft light and make people look kind of nice because they fill in wrinkles and stuff like that because light's coming from every direction, but they do not do the kind of dramatic theatrical backlighting that those old single source instruments can do.
The other thing to look at is LED on fabric. That's become kind of the thing that all the kids are doing, which is that, you have basically a fabric with LEDs embedded into them. And then you can actually, there's a lot of options as far as hanging them and pushing them in there. These are again, guys showing these right now. So these are kind of flexible. And so you can really put them into a lot of places. And they're kind of, they're pretty slick as far as coverage goes. You oftentimes want to diffuse them because the LEDs are actually pretty far apart. So they will create an odd pattern if you don't put something in front of them. It's good. Next question. By the way, we're running before Bill gets going. We're running a little low on questions for the general hour. So, this is probably a good time to ask them if you have any. This is a good. We're having a little space there. All right, go ahead, Bill.
Tony Mobley's back in from Newman, Georgia. What's the best hub to use for the Mac Mini M1 after several months of use? USB-A ports are all full for him.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken. Oh, we can't hear you. I'm sure you're telling us a lot of great things. We just don't know what they are. Computers. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, anything from OWC or MacSales.com. They have all kinds of things that you can plug in to get more ports. I put the link in.
Yeah, OWC I think is, in my opinion, the leader in this area right now as far as producing the best peripherals for the computers. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, connected to mine right now that I've just been beaten on is that Cal Digit. I believe it's called the TS3, but it's been totally solid. So I had an OWC, and I know you guys love it, but it didn't work out for me with the 10G Ethernet as advertised. So it went. So
got it. Okay. Ken, did you get your mic working?
Yes, I did. Yeah, it's already been answered. It's the OWC, and they do a great new travel version if you're on a budget, which is great.
It's great. Next question.
Jeff Francis here in the panel from Columbia, South Carolina, in search of a looper and multi-effects pedal board with Pro XLR mic input and with phantom power. Recommendations. Note for musicians whose hands are occupied, so it must be foot controlled.
Phantom power is tough.
We might be stumped. Have you found anything even close, Jeff?
Actually, yeah, someone put in the chat a tabletop Boss, but then I went and looked at the Boss site, and they do have a higher end one that is foot controlled, has phantom power. Just not sure about how good the effects are.
Yeah.
The looper looks incredible, but.
And who makes that?
Boss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Victor?
Might want to look into the TC Electronic line of Ditto loopers. Not sure about the XLR, but they do make solid product.
That's great.
And I would trust their effects more than Boss.
Next question.
Gary L. in from Parkland, I'm not sure where that is. Are there any suggestions for media transport networks or other methods for moving large video files aside from just better broadband? We need to move video files to editors who are working at home due to COVID. Thanks.
Go ahead, Bill.
You know what I'm going to say. Frame.io's transfer service was transformative for me. If you are a Frame.io subscriber, transfer comes with it, and their magicians have managed to figure out how to utterly saturate every ounce of bandwidth you can put into your house or office. And we are transferring big files amazingly quickly because of it.
The only thing depending on your connection up to 1 gig, the only thing we found to be faster than Frame.io is possibly Media Shuttle, which is like 10 times more than Frame.io, and FedEx. so that that becomes like FedEx is it's an amazing broadband tool. You can move terabytes in overnight, from one place to another. Yeah. So you can take 20 terabytes, 100 terabytes. You can just move it overnight. It's just there the next day. And so most of the time, although FedEx did on one project in the fall, took 5 terabytes and just lost it. Like it literally disappeared. They don't have it anywhere in their system. They couldn't track it. It was in that chaos of COVID and holidays. It's probably not the time to use it. Mickey.
Yeah, if you have a large NAS at say your main studio or office, you could set up VPN so that your editors can log in directly to the office network and access that NAS. That way, you don't have to transfer to an intermediary location and then have the editors download. They can just transfer directly from the office.
Next question.
Art by Junior of Cupertino says, I have 4 HyperDecks. One that records program is recording a high-pitched tone. Our editor removes it somehow, but I want to lose it during production. Note the only clue that I have is routing anything other than the ME1 or ME2 does not contain the tone. It's an ATEM 4ME 4K switcher.
I guess my question is do you hear it? Like, is it just in the record, or do you actually hear it when you push it out of a monitor? Go ahead, Courtney, and then Jeff.
One thing you might look at is switch out power supplies, because a lot of times all these switching power supplies have some high frequency components that will clash sometimes with audio high frequencies, and they'll end up back down with overtones down in the audible range. So swap out your power supplies and see if the tone goes away.
Jeff, and then Mickey.
Just go into the mixer on those switchers and make sure that there's not an input open that you are not using that just has that tone sitting on it.
Yeah, Mickey.
And yeah, exactly what Jeff mentioned. Like I would go through it and do a process of elimination and see where exactly that's coming through. You mentioned ME1 or ME2. What is routed to ME1 or and ME2, and see exactly what audio source is feeding that noise in.
It seems like I would look pretty closely at the analog inputs into the mixer. I mean, into the switcher. What's going to the analog? What are they like if you just mute the analog inputs for your switcher? Does it go away? Because the place where it would most likely enter the switcher into program would be through the analog inputs. Go ahead, Jeff, and then Mickey, and then Bill.
I'll put this in Discord, but it seems like we need a second hour on systematic troubleshooting skills.
Yeah. Mickey?
And yeah, just a basics of mixing. Any channel that's not needed, pot them down, and that will solve a lot of potential issues.
Well, and then again, to find it, pot everything, turn everything, mute everything. Do you hear it? Then we know it's the system. Then turn the analog back on, because we think that's probably the problem. Do you hear it? Now we can go after that problem specifically. Go ahead, Bill.
I'll suggest after a while you get used to what certain things sound like. You can eliminate them or not quickly. A 60 hertz US ground lifted buzz. We all know what that sounds like. A 1K tone fed in for line level. We know what that sounds like. And if you hear that, you go, oh, that's what that is. If it's higher than that, maybe it's something else.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on to Alex 4D of London again, who says the 2020 iPad Air is almost an iPad Pro. What do you think Apple will do to the 2021 iPad Pros to differentiate them from non-Pro iPads?
Oh no, magic. I think magic. Go ahead, Guy.
I'm gonna do a proud dad moment here, because this is my boy. Just 2 days ago, he's starting to use the Teradek Air. His school picked up a bunch of these, and one thing that I noticed in the non-pro versus the pro is that there's 2 lenses, and so I'm hoping that they'll put the lens, a zoom lens, because more people are just gonna be streaming, and so hopefully they'll put a 2x lens so that we can get these shots like this closer up without having to resort to digital zoom. So that would be my hope, is better camera, bit more lenses.
That you couldn't put too many lenses onto an iPad, as far as I'm concerned. like put a 4x, a 2x, 0.5, 1. Like you got a lot of space back there. In fact, the other thing that I would love is for them to on the iPad is to put another set of lenses that are interocular, or the interocular distance or, of a human. So there's like 2 sets of them, because then it could shoot stereo. Like you could have which would be really useful if you needed stereo in the future. So anyway, that would be another option. One of the things I don't think anyone's used the Snap. I didn't realize Snap's new 3rd generation has stereo video. It's just that it's horribly low resolution. So that I was kind of like, oh, that's really cool. And then I was like, no, it's not cool. It's just not enough resolution. But it's an interesting idea to be able to put sunglasses on that have basically lenses on either corner to shoot stereo. I just want someone to send. It's too expensive for me to be willing to buy it just to test it. I bought the first Snap ones and I never used them. So next question.
Ray Harris of Houston says, suggestions for finding more women to participate, maybe to get the word out to our women's tech groups. More women listeners will find you the women who can panel. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it could work. I actually do that a fair bit. So I try to speak it. I look for stuff to speak at where there's a large concentration, trying to bring more people in to see that, and hopefully that'll work. Next question.
Alex 4D Goldner is back with, sometimes you can learn about tech from reading a book. What book did you read recently that you can recommend?
Shopcraft as Soul Shop Class as Soulcraft. It's great. In fact, it's so good. I'm thinking it'd be fun for us to read books, as a group, and have our little weekly discussion, like a second hour or a Saturday or a Sunday or something like that, where we read books. And that'd be the kind of book that I would use. The book club. Yeah, exactly. Because but like ones that are really about the craft is what I'm kind of interested in, of just talking through it, because I think that the shop class of Soulcraft is a really, really good, just philosophical book about trade, the trades and the need to do things and make things. It's been really, and then there's one called The Craftsman, I think that is similar to that. Go ahead, Peter, and then Stuart, and then Guy.
Well, one I've reread recently is, and I've read it multiple times. It's now it's been out for 40 years. It's called The Mythical Man Month by Frederick Brooks, which is about managing large development projects, which as I listen to you guys talk, I suddenly realized the principles apply whether you're talking about large video projects or large technical electronic engineering projects or programming projects. The other one is the Phoenix Project, which again is how do you manage large iterative development projects. But
and what was the first one? The first one was the Mythical
Man Month. Now it's an interesting, it's written by Dr. Frederick Brooks. I don't even know if he's still alive anymore. It's a 40-year-old book, but he was professor emeritus at UNC in the engineering development environment. But his prior job he was the development program manager for something oddly called System 360. In other words, the original IBM mainframe, the $5 billion bet in 1963 that they did.
Right.
Yeah. So large projects. And his favorite line is plan to throw one away.
Yeah. Go ahead, Stuart, and then Guy. We're going to have to accelerate because we now have a lot of questions.
Can the Office Hours Book Club do reviews on user manuals and provide feedback to the manufacturers for which ones are useless and which ones are well written?
Ruthless
because
reviews.
there's a whole lot.
They're all useless. Like they're all like that's the problem. I mean, other than random reference, it frustrates me so much because it is the most important thing they do other than the product. And most people just don't spend any time or effort on it. They just hope other people build videos about it because they don't have any commitment to actually doing it themselves. And it's embarrassing, about how badly, and I read a lot of manuals and I haven't read a single one that was ever above a 2. Guy, and then Mickey.
Yeah, I learned about this one here on Office Hours from Brian Anderson. He brought it up. It's called Orbiting the Giant Hairball. And it's mostly about corporate, but it helps you just get more creative and realize, some people are in that rabbit hole and you just want to distance yourself and get back to your creativity. So thank you, Brian, for recommending this one. It's renewed my sense of just creativeness. So thanks.
That's great. Mickey, and then Sky, and then Stephen, real quick, because we're now deep in the hole.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I read a book by Sylvia Massey. Actually, it's like a comic book called "Recording Unhinged," and she essentially writes about her very out of the box way of recording music, from like recording a drum kit using a garden hose and stuff like that. And it's not very technical, but it just gets you thinking to, like, I don't have to stick to the way everyone else is doing things. There's room to play around.
Before there was technology, there was story. So I would vote up the concept of story, and maybe Robert McKee's story. It's very dense. It's not a fast read, but at least it would give us a lot of lexicon on what we're doing this technology for.
I go Stephen real quick.
Cathedral and the Bazaar. In other words, know what you're doing and the scale that you are doing it.
Very good. Next question.
We're going
to answer concise, and I'll probably cut people off now because we went from no questions to I don't know how we're going to get to the bottom of the hour. All right.
Yeah.
Go.
Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand. I installed Resolve 17 on my Linux PC and it works great, but I've noticed I inadvertently installed 17.1 beta on my Mac. Will this version 17.1 cause me issues while catching up on the training?
You should be able to just go up and download it again, and it'll just write over it. I mean, you shouldn't have to, I would just get the newest one for the Mac and just write over it. Just install what they have there. You don't have to get the beta anymore. So that would be my recommendation. Next question.
Doug Ferguson, Fort Wayne. What are some strategies for helping technically challenged clients with getting them on comms or even navigating the Zoom app for an upcoming conference?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Number one, patience. And a second trick that works with my 92-year-old father-in-law is to have a second device and have a FaceTime call so you can actually look over their shoulder and see where they're clicking. Sometimes you need that. Even if you have the ability to do screen share and screen control, you need the ability to get them to click in the right spot.
The other thing is that PDFs and videos help a lot. Like, do not send someone Unity without, that hasn't used it, without a PDF on how to get it set up. It's not just, don't just send, here's your address and make this work. Like for Agent IC, I have a PDF that is very, very clear. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. And it took me a day to build this PDF of how to do ClearComm, how to get into a ClearComm. I haven't done that for Unity yet, but most of the folks that we've worked with have used it in the past. But as we build that up again, step-by-steps, videos, again, we get back to the manual conversation, is the wetware development of making sure that it's just, there's a couple different ways they can learn how to do it. And it might be you having a conversation, watch the video, look at the PDF, and then I'm going to get on the phone with you. When our big kits go out, I'm live over video building it with them to make sure that they get it done. That's how you get through that hub. So, and then the first time they do it, once people get over the hump, then they never want to go back to stupid things like phones, like a phone call, like a phone bridge, just insanely stupid. So, but you just have to get them over the hump. Next question.
Victor Cahallo, Brookings, South Dakota. How do I feature an upcoming live stream on YouTube so that it shows the upcoming event on my channel?
That's scheduling an event into the future. So you just need to, so you have to go in and schedule. You can go live or you can schedule it. You schedule it into the future, and then you'll have to now use a custom RTMP from Zoom if you're going to do it from Zoom, rather than, you can't attach a Zoom event to a scheduled event. Go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, I've scheduled it, but some people, when you go to their channel, they actually show upcoming shows basically, and and that's what I'm trying to accomplish. So I've already scheduled it.
So yeah, so what you need to do there is there's a tray. You have to build. I don't know what we call them trays, but you can go into your channel layout, and there's a place where you can. There should be a tray that is upcoming shows that you can put in there. If there are multiple shows, and you can move the tray of live up too. So there's live and there's upcoming. Should be trays that are available to you within the channel as far as that setting goes. You can also, one of the other things that we do is you build a little promo video and you make that both the subscriber and non-subscriber, featured video that's on your channel. So, hey, we're doing this live stream on Sunday, blah, 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 blah. So that's what people see when they do it. A lot of people, like Patreon folks, put that there. Hey, I'm now on Patreon. They put it up on the thing. And so but using that featured area with a video is really useful.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yep. Next question.
Gert Mahi of Udhaverly says, I use a Raspberry Pi with playoutbee and an ATEM Mini, and it works nicely. He's got another Pi coming to experiment. Any good project ideas?
I guess doing videos, showing off videos. I don't have any specific one other than using it for what you need it to use. I don't know what the project would be. The only thing I would do is really test the limits of where playoutbee works. So on the Raspberry Pi, even Jonas will tell you that there's some tearing. So I would build a bunch of videos with graphics, go out and shoot videos with your phone, and go through different types of videos and see how it performs. And then the other thing I would do is do long playouts, short playouts, and also play with sweepers, and how that, how that might work in that process. And so those are the kind of things I would just be testing the limits of it and the stability of it if I didn't have anything else to work on. Go ahead, Stuart, and then Peter, and then we'll move on.
If we're just after suggestions and things that would help people, how about low-cost bionics? Like the 3D printable limb, but they don't have any interaction with the nervous system yet.
I think the question is projects around the playoutbee and the ATEM Mini. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, the one I've been playing with is actually using a Pi to be the host for my Stream Deck.
Yep.
So it's a consolidated place and then controls multiple machines from there. So
yep. Next question.
Jason Panks, Nashville, says for Zoom recommended lighting temperature, 3200, 5600 Kelvin or somewhere in between, and should all lights be the same temperature?
Go ahead, Bill.
You just want, most cameras modern will work on either, but you don't want to do mostly one and then a spotlight or something like that from the other. Just use all the same, but it doesn't matter if they're all 32 or all 56, as long as it's not mostly 56 with a 32 on your face, that'll look bad.
If I had to pick between one or the other, I would do 56. Just easier to deal with. It's easier to deal with windows and outdoors and everything else. So if I'm picking it, and some webcams we found actually respond better to 56 than they do to 32. Stuart, real quick.
Doesn't really matter, but as long as if you've got the right sort of camera, you hold up a white card in front and use the white balance function, because then it will look natural regardless of whether it's daylight or tungsten.
You can also get slightly blue ones that will make it slightly warm. Next question.
Tom R. Irving, Texas. Speaking of noise in a captured clip, what's the consensus on the favorite or most effective plugin to remove fan or AC audio noise in a video?
Jeff?
Isotope RX.
Yes. Next question.
Nicholson of Wake Forest, North Carolina. How do you map out your signal flow for an event? I've been using Whimsical to build a flow chart, but love something more industry focused.
I've been using OmniGraffle since it came out. so that's all I know how to use. That's Mac based. There are other PC based ones. I don't. The folks that in our crew that do it in PCs generally use AutoCAD to do it. But I don't have another solution. Go ahead, JJ, real quick.
Visio is really easy to use too. Just jump
Visio.
in and put the Visio together.
Yep, Visio is a good one. And there's some good ones on the PC that have a lot of stuff pre-built that I think are probably a little bit better than OmniGraffle as far as how it handles the lines. But I just don't use a PC often enough to do that. Go ahead, Jeff.
For simple, free online stuff, diagrams.net works fairly well.
Yep. Next question.
Henry Ramos in Yonkers says, I have a couple of old ARRI 1K lights, considering Visionsmith LED relamps for them, but they're pricey at $600. Is it worth it, or should I look for new Fresnels?
I just get new Fresnels. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah. For $600, like keep in mind that the LED will last a lot longer than your older tungsten-based bulbs. So think of, at what point will you make up that initial expense? But if you're able to reuse those old 1K housings, then why not? Because like you can get it's easier to get hard light if ever you need hard light with a Fresnel lens, as opposed to most, as Bill mentioned previously, most LED panels now are based on Cobb chip on board LEDs.
There's a lot of really good ones, whether I think Aperture and Nanlite are the two that are giving you basically the same experience, but it's a modern housing. And I don't think it's going to be any more expensive than what you're talking about replacing. So now you're going to end up in this situation where for maybe a little bit more, you end up with a modern housing in a modern system that's all designed to be modern. So I don't think I think it's just going to cost you time to do that beyond the money. Go ahead, Stuart.
I've got a wide collection of odd lights, including some 1Ks. I leave them on the shelf with a couple of spare globes ready for when they are needed as tungsten light sources. But for the $600, the Aperture, the brand new ones they've just launched, are a fantastic bargain.
They're good.
Don't forget that LEDs age over time. So, but yeah.
They're good props though. So I'm thinking of getting a couple of old housings just to put in the background. Next question.
Tyler Darlington of San Diego here says, is there a way to visualize the routing of OSC devices? Interested in visualizing how information travels in a node or a block diagram based way.
I mean, Isadora kind of does that, and Universe kind of does that. You're building that node, and it actually does it, but I don't think it shows you it actually working, which would be really cool. Let's go on to the next question. We're running out of time.
Oh, okay. Nathan Nicholson, Wake Forest, North Carolina, is in with Freelance or full-time, and why? If Freelance, is there a significant advantage to setting up an LLC, limited liability corporation, in the U.S.?
In California, there is. It's really hard to work with freelancers in California without an LLC because of the AB5. So you need it's much easier for companies to work with you if you are a true LLC or an S corp. You don't have to be C corp, but it's you get a different level of you open yourself up to a different level of company when you do that. When you come in as a freelancer, it's difficult. So to work with you for big corporations. So building that out is one step to opening up a new opportunity for the kind of work that you can get. So it's just something. It's a lot easier for us to attach to people who have a company that is going to manage all those bits and pieces, and I think that'll become more and more important. The salary versus freelance is just how industrious you are. Freelance will give you a lot more flexibility and a lot more freedom, but you have to really, it's kind of a rough term, but you eat what you kill. So you have to, the food's not coming from anywhere else, and so you just have to be very on it to make that work, and you have to build up savings, and you have to build up overhead, and you have to, there's a lot of things that come with working for yourself that you just have to be ready for. And if you're not ready for that, then you should get a salary job. So I have a salary job. I'm quite happy with it. So next question.
Joe Lovell of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania says, longtime listener, first time question. Can you discuss Adobe Premiere Pro versus Final Cut Pro? I'm a Mac person and feel like I chose incorrectly with Adobe.
Here's the thing is, if you're working with other teams that require Premiere, then I think that you need to use Premiere. If it's a larger team or you're working with larger teams that want to use that. If you're cutting on for yourself, I would generally lean towards Resolve or Final Cut. And if I was going for speed, if I'm charging per hour, I would use Resolve. If I'm charging per project, I would use Final Cut. As far as like how fast I can get something done. Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, this is not a Mac versus PC answer, so we'll just go with it. One significant advantage Adobe Premiere has is when you look up for job adverts for work, people often say must use Adobe Suite, must use Adobe Premiere Pro. You may have the skills as an editor, but unless you've used it, you probably won't get considered for the job.
Yeah, it just it depends on whether you're selling yourself as a freelancer that's going to come in and work on a team, or you're doing finished product. So if you're delivering finished product and no one cares about, how you integrate with it, you can just get the work done faster in Final Cut than you can in Premiere. It's a more modern system. It'll run better on your Mac. And there are tools that are being put into Final Cut, which a lot of us calculate will be really useful as AR becomes more important. When you start seeing USDZ and 3D models appearing in Final Cut in motion, it's probably going to be, it's not super useful or as useful now as it will be in the future. Go ahead, Bill, and then Roscoe.
Yeah, I was just going to say, listen, if you're the kind of piano player who they're going to tell you what piano to play the piano they're giving you. If you're the kind of piano player that wants to play your own piano and you're happy to take it with you wherever you go, play your own piano. That's, there are different approaches to editing, and one will resonate with some editors and one will resonate with the others. I don't think there's a problem with either approach.
Yep. Next question.
Joe Lovell of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I have mentioned office hours on the Sound Girls Facebook page. I can mention it again. Oh, that's going back. Joe's going back to our. Yeah, that'd be great. We'd love to have
That's great. Next question.
James Babbitt, of San Diego. When you watch TikTok at home, do you use the Mac or the TikTok app on an iOS device or on a smart TV streaming video or screen mirroring?
I mirror it, mirror it from my phone. So it's usually it's now become, like when you used to go to movies and you watch the preview, there's like some previews or there was like a little cartoon or whatever. Usually now, before we sit down and watch a TV show, right now we're burning through Heroes at the moment from 2006. As everyone's kind of collecting in the house, we usually throw up TikTok and watch it for 10 or 15 minutes. And it's kind of like the little pre-show, let our eyes get used to the dark and everything else before the show. And it's really good. It's really a useful thing. But yeah, I mirror the phone. It works great. Next question.
Kyle Hammond of Chicago says, I haven't had time to experiment yet, but I'm hoping to use multiple ATEM Minis to set up 2 locations that share a camera in the middle. Any issues with looping I should avoid?
I think you need to split it. I don't think you can loop it. I don't think there's any way to really loop through the minis effectively. I mean, you can, but I wouldn't. I mean, you could do it out of the output, but that's one being dependent on the other. I think, and then you can't use that one as a switcher. So I think you have to split the HDMI from the camera to both of those. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I agree. Splitting is better, but isn't the input one, the reason it's different is you can do a direct output straight through to the HDMI output from input number 1. You wouldn't get multi-view on that ATEM.
Oh, you could. Yeah, you could do all of them. I think actually you could do any of the outputs could go straight out of the HDMI, and then you would have.
I think input 1 is a different chip that allows lower latency direct output.
It could be, yeah. And I haven't tested that. The other thing is that if you were using them as 2 separate sharing it, and you were using the USB-C, as that, you could do that. Now, of course, this gets a little easier with the Extreme Minis because you have 2 HDMI outs, so you could theoretically do something more complex there. We'll all know as we all start to have our Extremes arrive. Super excited. Next question.
Somebody asked about Ernest Lloyd of Bastrop, Louisiana says, I asked a question yesterday about pull down backgrounds for some lawyers. They don't like pop-ups and would like a roller shade type. I could bolt on the wall behind them and roll up when not in use. Any recommendations?
Bill?
The only thing I know of, Draper, the famous screen, they make corporate boardroom screens, will do custom backgrounds of any kind. So you could get a photo translated into that or a color or whatever.
Yeah, go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, has to be an abundance of old projector screens that you could just pull down. Some of them were glass beads. Some of them had a neutral background, but it may be an option.
Yeah, neutral background daylight, like the daylight ones I think some of them are not glass bead. The glass bead will be very complicated, but if they don't have that super bright return, you're right that they may be reasonably good. Definitely for lawyers, I would recommend the motorized ones. It's just easier. Hit the button and they go down. It's cool. They can afford it. Next question.
Rupert McRae of Dallas, Texas, has our last general question. I have an underutilized digital oscilloscope used for electronic servicing. It's a Roy-Gall 4-channel unit. Can the panel suggest any practical or amusing purpose this could be put to in AV production? And thanks, everyone.
Go, Jeff.
If it has an XY mode, which it should, put your left-right stereo audio into it and look at a Lisa-Jus pattern to see your stereo. Predecessor to the phase scope.
Perfect. And right on time. I'm ready to change gears. I was worried. We had an when I said we needed questions, the audience stepped up. So that was good. So anyway, so thanks to the audience for saving the show. And now we're going to switch over to talking about drones. And this is a perfect day for it. One of our questions we'll get into is the talking about the new DJI drone. But drones have come a long way, and we have our own Ray Maxwell here to talk a little bit about them. Hey, Ray. What would you consider, before we get into the questions, what would you consider an introduction to how people should think about drones?
Well, the next, hopefully 15 minutes, I'm going to give you one.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, let me just Let me just go
Let's
through
go
the
through
talk.
it. So
think-
Ray's gonna talk to us about 15 minutes about drones, and then while he's doing that, is a good time for you to put those questions in. Remember, now we're kind of in the mode of just answering questions around drones. So if you have other questions, you'll have to wait until tomorrow. You should have asked them earlier. All right, go ahead, Ray.
All right. Well, my title of my talk today is Drones, Disruptive Technology, because boy, they have disrupted a whole bunch of things. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each one. I am going to get how to shoot with the drone, aimed specifically at this group and production. But let me give you a little history, first of all. Let's face it, RC model airplanes have been around and helicopters for a long time. But if you wanted one, you had to find a good hobby shop. Usually you had to go to the cities. There's usually one or two shops only, or you had to do mail order. If when you walked into one of those and said, I want to buy an RC model airplane or helicopter, a reputable hobby shop owner would tell you, here are the names of some RC flying clubs. Please go to one of these and get training. Because the average lifespan of a model airplane or a single rotor model helicopter is 30 seconds.
I did better. My first one, I think my first one, I got a minute and a half out of it before I just completely destroyed it. It was
so, and there's a number of other very good things about the RC flying clubs. First of all, when you go there, you will be taught a safety culture. The club will have safety rules. It will insist that you belong to a national organization which also has a safety code. It's the AMA in the US. It's a MAC here in Canada, and there's others all over the world. When you join that national organization, you also will end up with liability insurance, which is very important if you ever hit anybody with your airplane. So, any rate, that was the history before drones. You joined a club, you joined these organizations. Drones came along. They seemed to be easy to fly. Anyone can fly one. Everyone started selling them. And, you could buy them. You can buy them here in Canada at London Drug. You can buy them at Best Buy. The clerks in those stores know nothing about drones. If you hit one that does, you're lucky. So you don't get that warning about what could happen with your drone. So, any rate, suddenly everybody was flying drones, and it didn't matter whether they had any training or any judgment. And they terrorized the world, literally. And so the government, people went nuts, the media went nuts, and suddenly there was a cry for regulation. And at first they kind of went overboard. The FAA in the US, Transport Canada in Canada, and all over the world, the aviation people just went nuts. And what was really bad is a lot of local governments tried to regulate them. And particularly in the States and Canada, the aviation regulators said, no, we regulate the air above your ground. If you're, running a park or whatever, no, you don't regulate these things. We do. However, the parks and everything went to the FAA and they put in restrictions. Now, let's look very briefly at the regulations that now have started to settle in. First of all, if you find a mini drone or micro drone that's under 250 grams, there are no regulations, and go out and have a fine time. They're small enough if they hit anybody, and most of them have protected propellers. They won't hurt anybody. From 250 grams to 55 pounds in the US, there are regulations. You have to register, and if you're flying only for recreational purposes, that's about the end of it. But if you're going to fly for hire, and that includes doing volunteer search and rescue or anything like that, anything that has a hint of commercial operation, you have to get a Part 107 license in the US. you have to get a RPAS license with advanced privileges in Canada. Now, there are two distinct markets for drones. The one that we're going to touch on this morning, thanks to DJI, is the RPV racing drone. That's not RPV, FPV, first person video. This is the one that you often wear goggles, and it's like it puts you in the drone and you race around the course and all that sort of thing. That is FPV, first person video. Now, you always fly with a spotter who can immediately take over control of the drone if it starts to act up or if you lose orientation or whatever. The second market where drones fit in, and it's the one I'm in, is super steady camera platforms. Drones specifically designed to carry a camera, give you, I call mine a flying tripod. It is extremely stable and extremely smooth, and lets you do.
What's the one you're using?
I am using an Inspire 2 with an X7 camera.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go into detail about it shortly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what brought all this about was disruptive technology. So let's look at what, and it's amazing how many things had to come together to make this happen. But one of the first things was a MEMS, MEMS gyro, which is microelectronic mechanical systems. And gyros let you control or sense roll, pitch, and yaw, okay? But they don't tell you when you are level. So they had to come out with a second MEMS device called an accelerometer. And you have a 3-axis accelerometer, and it tells you, if, for instance, if there's one in this axis in the drone, all right, it is going to tell you when you're level, it will read 1G. When you're on your side, it reads 0. When you're upside down, it's going to read minus 1G. Now, if you put that in 3-axis, you put another one this way, another one that way, you can tell when the unit is completely level, because this one's going to be 1G and the other two are going to be 0G. All right. So now you have sensors that can tell your control system when you are not roll, pitching, or yawing, moving, and tell you when you are level. So great, we've now got
And those sensors it was just someone figured out how to configure them, right? I mean, it wasn't like they'd been around for a while. It was just a matter of, was it?
Well, I worked with an LTN-51 inertial navigation system back in the 70s that had all of those devices in it. It cost $100,000.
Right.
Okay.
What were you gonna say, Peter?
I was about to say, because what really was disruptive, Matt Ray, is the level of miniaturization they got to, and thus getting the cost out of the equation. Because
right.
I worked on the ship's internal navigation system on submarines. It had the exact same stuff.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's been around. It's been around for a long time. These MEMS gyros and accelerometers are grown on a chip. Okay. Later in the question period, if you want me to go into the details how they work, I will. But I'm trying to get through this first section so we have lots of time for questions. But the next problem is now we've got an aircraft that is stable, it's level, and it roll, pitch, and yaw, but the wind can blow it downwind. So the next technology we needed was GPS. So GPS can now tell it where it is, anywhere in the world, and we can send that information to the control system, and it will hold position even in a wind. Okay? The next technology needed was lithium polymer batteries. These batteries are amazing. They can output 50 to 100 amps for 5 to 10 minutes, and in the case of the camera ones, up to 30 minutes. So now we've got a power supply that's light, compact, very high current density, and very low internal resistance, so they can really deliver current. The next technology was rare earth motors. Okay, these rare earth motors are somewhere between 95 and 98% efficient. so they can deliver power. In my helicopter, I have a single motor that delivers, it's only about this big around, and it delivers 1 horsepower at 20,000 RPM. And that's geared down to 2,000 RPM on the rotor. Okay, the next thing is when you have these rare earth motors, to be efficient, run on 3-phase AC. And you say, whoa, wait a minute, Ray, you've got a battery. How does it deliver 3-phase AC? Well, the next technology that was needed was high current field effect transistors that can switch up to 100 amps at 400 to 1,000 hertz. So those field effect transistors in a electronic speed control for your model allow you to control the speed of your rare earth motors and consequently your propellers. Now, the next technology that's old technology that was added is my drone below 10 meters, or if I'm flying inside where it has no GPS, it has a camera looking out the bottom of the thing full time, and it works like an optical mouse. It looks at the texture of the floor, and it can detect if there's any motion just the way your optical mouse works. All right? So those were all the technologies. 20 years ago, practically none of those existed.
And now we could buy them for $53 on Amazon.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah.
That's great.
And most of them were developed in the last 10 years. So now let's get down to flying. What can go wrong? How am I? Oh, I'm going to do it. Okay, for time. Here we go. First of all, you have to go out and practice, because you must fly by reaction. If you have to think about where the drone is, what direction it's facing, and then decide what control motion to put in, you're lost. Okay. You must go out, find a wide open field with no trees and nobody around, and practice. Because the first mistake you will make is at first you'll fly the drone directly away from you. And let me grab my controller.
It's coming back towards you is the thing that gets you.
Yeah, exactly. Here I am. And when I push this stick to the right, it moves to the right. When I move it to the left, it moves to the left until it turns around. It is facing me. And now that's reversed. It's still moving to its right when I push to the right, but it's now moving to my left, okay, which will drive you nuts when you're first learning. And when it's flying sideways, again, you move it to the right, it moves away from you and towards you. You have to learn to react. The other thing that is difficult with drones, more so than airplanes, is it's sometimes when you get them far enough away from you, you can't tell whether they're coming towards you or going away from you because they're very symmetrical. So mine has lights on the front and the back that are different colors. Right. So I can instantly tell whether it's going towards me or away from me. So that left-right switch is the thing that messes people up right away, because as long as they're flying it away from themselves and it's facing away from them, at first it looks, man, this is duck soup, nothing to it. And then when you can fly it in a figure 8 in front of yourself, you got it. Okay. And that's a good practice maneuver. Fly a figure 8 and then reverse it. Okay. And when you can do that by instinct, you're starting to learn. All right. The next thing is, as soon as you fly more than 50 feet away from you, you must have a spotter. And the ideal thing, particularly when you're learning, is a fellow flyer who's skilled with a buddy box. These units can be hooked up so that you can control the machine from 2 of them, and the safety person has a button on his, and he can take over at any time and cut the control off from you. And that's very excellent. We call that person a spotter. Now, let's get down to filming. You can film And I have done a fair bit of it, one-man operation. All right. But you have to fly the drone, and the only extra control you have to deal with is tilting the camera up and down. All right. But my drone, I can turn the camera, it retracts its gear so it can look straight out and turn 360 degrees. But I usually, if I'm flying one-man operation, I usually do not steer the camera. Instead, I turn the entire drone. That's more instinctive and easier. However, if you're doing a more serious operation, then it's a two-man operation. And I have a second controller, and that second controller goes to the camera operator. And the camera operator now can steer the camera relative to the drone. But I want you to keep something very important in mind. I think it's very important that your pilot have a photographic or video background, because your pilot controls your point of view. Right. He places the drone where you are, and he must be cognizant of the focal length of lens that you have on it, how close he should move, how slowly he should move, etc.
And we have questions stacking up, so I think we're gonna jump into the questions here.
Okay. Well, I'm almost. I can finish this off in 1 minute.
30 seconds. Okay. Good.
Okay. I also do a three-man operation. I have a focus puller control. By the way, lens choice. The serious drones, almost all nothing but prime lenses. I have a 16, 24, 35, 50, all f2.8. They're with a super 35 sensor. All of the lenses are perfectly balanced in the same weight, so the gimbal is dynamically balanced and super steady. This thing can deliver 6K Cinema DNG, ProRes RAW HQ, ProRes 422 HQ, ProRes 444. And finally, helicopters and airplanes versus drones. Drones work best for under 400-foot work. You can fly them inside. Helicopters you can't. And of course, they're lower cost.
When you fly the helicopter indoors, it gets caught on all kinds of things. It gets caught in the Christmas tree and in the lights. It's a real problem. It's no matter how small you make it, even a little R22, it just isn't going to fly very well inside of most people's houses. There's a couple of people's houses it might work. All right, let's go ahead and
18 minutes TED Talk.
Yeah. I think that we're one of the things that the 18-minute TED Talk. I think that we're gonna our version is like an 8-minute TED Talk. It's like, because I think the culture here is so Q&A driven that it's just like I think TED Talk was revolutionary when it hit, but I think that here we're like 8 minutes. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
First one comes from Charles Klein in New York City. Drones, thoughts on the new DJI FPV? Let's go drone racing. I think Ray touched on that. Do you want to go farther or leave it alone?
No. I think that it's interesting. I watched the video that Justine put up, and it looked like a lot of fun. Go ahead, Stuart.
Junk, toss it. It's going to be so expensive when you park it into a wall. It's not funny. If you're going drone racing, you want a cheap carbon fiber quad, nothing else. The DJI stuff is just going to cost more than a helicopter.
I'm more interested in just the cool experience of feeling like you're flying through something, in VR. I think I'm more interested in, and I think that there's some shots that would be easier to do that way. When I'm just in it and just kind of getting to seeing what I'm doing. But as a racing thing, I wouldn't
get a quad with a single axis gimbal.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the controller either. I want tactile controls.
Yeah. Next question.
Talak Lopez Waterman in New York says, how much wind is too much wind?
That entirely depends upon the speed that your drone can achieve. Mine can go 55 miles an hour. I typically don't fly in winds above 15 knots.
I generally don't. I have to admit, I don't have the money to allocate it because it's not something that I make money with. So if I can feel the wind, I usually go, well, this is not a good day to fly. Like if I don't feel it, I'm like, oh, it'll be okay. I've lost a couple drones in the wind, so I've gone through a lot of drones to the point where I'm usually pretty pretty conservative about my drone usage. Yeah, go ahead, Keenan. Keenan will have some input on this.
Yeah, so I don't do anything commercially, but I have 4,000 drone flights in my career for the county. There is an app in the States called Before You Fly, the letter B for You Fly. It will tell you if the conditions are okay for your flight. So that's just a quick app to have. It costs nothing. The FAA puts it out, and I'm 15 miles an hour or less, unless we're looking for a lost child, and then we'll go to 25 miles an hour with the matrice.
It's great. Stuart?
Just a note on drones that fly away. Trust me on this, practical experience. Do not turn on GoPro Wi-Fi when flying a DJI drone. They interfere with each other. The GoPro Wi-Fi interferes with the old controllers, not so much the 5.8 gigahertz ones, but definitely the 2.4s. Don't use them together. Use the DJI.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Brian Schwartz of Baltimore has, can you suggest a drone flight simulator that runs on the new Apple M1 computers?
Go ahead, Ray. You're muted, Ray. Still
Okay,
muted.
I'm not sure about the M1, but the two that I recommend and have on my machine right now is the Next NEXT simulator and the Aerofly RC8. Both of those have airplanes, helicopters, and drones in them. And no matter which of those three you're going to fly, get a simulator and practice, practice, practice.
Next question.
Mickey in the panel from Manila says, is there some standard in terms of communication or lingo between dual operator drone camera teams, or do the teams just make one up that works for them? Any examples?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah. Oh, I have kind of made it up on the fly, depending on their background and so forth.
Yeah, I've noticed even with because that kind of interaction happens with cable cams as well. And when we've sat next to cable cams, I've sat down 2 or 3 different teams, and their names are all different. Like there's a team that works together all the time, and I haven't heard them ever say the same things twice. between 2 different teams, they just have their own names for a move. I don't know how much they talk to each other. So
I'd just be in. Does it start with aviation language, Ray? Do the drone pilots start with using aviation terms? I mean, pitch roll, yaw, obviously those things.
It depends on the background and experience of the person working the camera. I mean, I have people who are excellent camera people, and if they don't have aviation experience, I steer clear of the aviation jargon. Mm-hmm. And I move, I'm going to move forward. I'm going to now move sideways, et cetera, rather than saying I'm going to pitch up and roll to the right,
Yeah. Go ahead, Mickey.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. The operators that I've at least that I've seen operate, they sort of have taken on the lingo of techno crane operators. Like they say boom up, boom down, track left, track right. And yeah, I was just wondering if that's standard or if people just make it up.
So far, it seems like they make it up, but I can see how it could become cultural in one place or another based on that. I have heard a lot. I will say that I have heard a lot of drone operators that come out of the film industry do exactly what you're talking about, which is they treat it like a techno crane that can go anywhere, and all their terms are pretty much tied to it. But a lot of them are crane operators that went to drones because they saw that as the next opportunity. Bill, our next question.
Yeah. Sky Gleason in Seattle says, I love the DJI headset I use with the Mavic Pro. Are there other options? What's the best practices with a headset tool? I don't know if anybody's seen it, but they posted, whoops, wrong. Oh, it's not there. Shoot. There's Adorama has the new DJI FPV goggles V2 that look very cool.
Yeah. Any Ray, do you use goggles, Ray?
I have the goggles. I use them with my Mavic Pro for fun. I never use them when I'm actually filming with the Inspire 2.
Go ahead, Stuart.
There's a couple of options there because there's a couple of questions about goggles and what have you. There are 2 things to remember. The DJI system is digital, but most goggles are analog for the transmitter and the receiver. So a lot of them won't work together, but you can get extra modules that plug into the DJI hardware that give you an analog receiver. There's also a couple of little issues with the DJI ones that people are reporting where the newest version has issues with some of the patch antennas. So just things to be aware of.
Next question.
Jason Panks from Nashville says drones, camera, video plus LiDAR. Thoughts?
So there's definitely drones out there. And I'm going to get Fred Fikert to come in and talk about LiDAR specifically. And but he's been doing a fair bit of that. There's definitely LiDAR sensors that are, actually DJI makes one with LiDAR sensors along with other image sensors. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, here in Canada, the RCMP uses drones with LiDAR to investigate traffic accidents. Used to, they got out theodolites and tape measures and all this. Now they bring out their drone, they fly around it, and they can get the highway open much quicker that way.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Ray, was it the RCMP who actually flew one of those drones into one of their own helicopters?
I haven't heard that, but it could be.
Quite possibly. The one thing that they won't have the same accuracy, at least the ones that I've seen so far won't have the same accuracy as a ground-based LiDAR, but they obviously will have a lot less shadowing. So, when with a ground-based LiDAR, you're going to have generally a lot higher acquisition rate because it's doing it slowly, and so it's able to get 1 million points a second, that type of thing, and it's going to come around and have a longer range, and its accuracy tends to be much tighter, but it has the problem of it can only see what it can see. So it's going straight out. And when you see the models created by it, you'll see these long shadows from something that was sticking up because it just didn't see anything past that. And that's where the drones are pretty good at that. Most of the time I've used it, I've just used photogrammetry. So the drones generate photogrammetry and you use targets to sync those with LiDAR and photogrammetry on the ground. Go ahead, Courtney.
Is the LiDAR on drones used primarily for collision avoidance or for 3D mapping like you're describing?
You can do 3D mapping. Yeah, I mean, some of them use it for that. Those sensors are some version of LiDAR, but that's usually a very low resolution LiDAR that's just designed to make sure it doesn't run into anything, and it doesn't always work. The ones that we're talking about are actual. Not that it's ever happened to me that my LiDAR equipped drone ended up in a tree, but that's what kids are for. Go up and get them. And anyway, so the mapping, we're talking about mapping. Go ahead, Ray.
Real quickly, the DJI drones do have collision avoidance sensors. They look forward, they look up, they look down. They do not look sideways, and they do not look behind them. Don't fly. If you pull back quickly, you can fly right into a wall. Okay. And they do not see bushes or trees. They see solid objects.
That's what I found out. All right, next question.
Stephen Kimbrough here on the panel from Berkeley says, are there any places or companies that have simulators for the 10 kilogram plus high-end drones? While I was at Flight Safety for some simulator time a few weeks ago, there was a lot of talk about that area developing.
Good, Ray.
I have not seen that yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
Yeah. Next question.
Chris Widener of Lafayette, Indiana says, does the DJI Smart Controller work with the Mini 2?
Don't know. All right, next question.
Michael Peters of Oakton, Virginia.
Oops, I hit the wrong. That is not a drone question, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
Next question.
Okay, no problem. Stuart Fairweather, Melbourne, Australia. One of the issues with the DJI system is the lack of HDMI video out on any of the consumer models. What's the easiest way to get video out of the DJI products to a multi-camera environment?
Good, Ray.
Okay, the one I have, my controller, again, has an SDI output. It's made for professionals, and you can take SDI out of it and do live. It is 1080p. It is not 4 or 6K.
We're just happy with the SDI. Go ahead, Keenan.
So the bigger I mean, from the Mavic Enterprise Dual, it has an HDMI out. You can do clean feed. And then my Matrice has the Cadence controller, which has SDI and HDMI out. So any of the larger ones, and then the Crystal Sky displays also have an HDMI out. So any of the prosumer above the Mavic Mini, yeah, Ray's showing it right now. They all have a native HDMI out, and you can control. Do you want to see telemetry? Do you want to see a clean feed? They're pretty great, and that's what we pump into my truck and then send
which
it out.
controller is that, Ray? Oh, can't hear you.
He's got the Cadence.
That's the Cadence.
Yeah, and this is the 1000 nit. Here, let me get the cover off of it. This is the 1000 nit display, and it does have HDMI out the side of it as well.
That's great. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I specifically mentioned consumer, so not the pro models that are well out of the budget of most people. I was thinking more along the lines of being able to have a phantom level helicopter or quadcopter floating above an FPV race doing a look down at the quads racing.
So the Phantom has a
live stream.
The Phantom does have an add-on for their controller. It's $99. I don't know if they still make it, that adds HDMI, because our first Phantoms have HDMI out also. The other way we do it is AirPlay from your phone controlling the Mavic Mini. You could AirPlay it to an Apple TV, put that as source into your ATEM.
That's great. That's great. Next question.
Mike Henderson in Colorado says, what's the best way to get rid of jello wiggle from drone video? Is this a post-processed filter or an incorrect setting in the drone camera?
Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, that has to do with the camera. The high-end cameras like I've got catch entire frames. They do not scan down. Yeah, so that's a product of how the camera works. And the low-end cameras, you'll get that. The high-end cameras, you will not.
Yeah, so it's a global. It's the global shutter is what's getting the whole frame. When you don't have that, it's basically what's happening. The reason you get the jiggle is because it's moved from the time it started scanning at the top to the time by the time it got to the bottom, and so you can see the movement in the jiggle, and so that is that's kind of a nature of some of the lower end cameras. Go ahead. Rolling shutter is what you're trying to avoid. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, for the GoPros and the built-in cameras on the consumer level drones, there are a lot of filters, like ND filters you put over. It will smooth out a lot of that because a lot of the jitter and noise is from the shutter speed being way too high. So you put the ND on it and the camera will automatically bring the shutter speed down to something that has nice motion.
Go ahead, Thomas. Did you have a question, Thomas? Oh, no. Next question.
Roscoe here is interested with drone-to-base communications. Any issues with radio communications these days? Are we using digital encryption or spread spectrum?
Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, almost all the drones now, the high-end ones certainly are using nothing but spread spectrum. Mine will talk on either 2.4 or 5.8, and it has a spectrum analyzer built right into it, and I can look and see if there's any interference on either channel, and it will then pick if I put it on auto, it will pick the best channel and the best band to work in. And it is spread spectrum. And on top of that, the DJI is frequency hopping spread spectrum, not just CDMA.
Next question.
Roscoe's back with what is your opinion of pre-programmed flight paths? Is the GPS accurate enough, or are you one puff from crashing into a tree?
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, it is extremely accurate. There are systems that make it even more accurate by doing a ground station that is fixed and talks to the drones. I have a friend who is working on drones flying in formation. All right. Now, he is not into camera work, oddly enough, but he's interested in these drone shows. Now, he's working right now with only 2 or 3 drones, but he hopes to build it up from there and control lights and the whole 9 yards. But yeah, that's a whole third area of drones.
It's interesting how quickly you get far enough off the ground that you're not actually interacting with anything on the ground. So that's what I found is that the GPS works great when I'm not at height that is too low. I don't use GPS when I can't get to, 60, 70 feet up, to do that, or 100 feet up, or whatever that is. And so, one of my uses for GPS is drone deploy. So if anyone's ever used drone deploy, you basically can define a space that is essentially on Google Maps. You literally draw a little thing around it, and you say, then I want you to go back and forth and just capture it all frame by frame by frame by frame by frame. And you hit it. I did my brother or my family's golf course this way. We just turn it on and it just goes whoop. It just goes up, and then you just watch the little drone just going back and forth. And it'll even come down and change back. You can change batteries, and it goes right back up and goes right back to where it started, and just keeps on going. And it just zigzags over the entire thing, and you just watch the whole process. And it is very accurate in that area. And then what you do is you upload all those photos to the web, and it comes back with a picture that's all blended together, or a model. It'll do photogrammetry, using that as well. So, and you can set it. You can also set it to take a point of interest, so it'll roll around an object as well and take all the photos that it needs. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I haven't been on a film shoot where they've actually used it to cover actors. So I don't. Has anyone had that experience? Does it work accurately every time you do another take? Is it follow the exact same path? You can set it up that way, it sounds like.
I don't know if it would be that accurate. Like, GPS itself, at least the consumer version of it. So you need ground-based, so you can do it, but you need ground-based reference for the larger, like really large drones, not even the bigger ones than the Phantoms, can do ground-based. So what you do is you get extremely accurate radio that is on the ground, and then the drone can look at that as well as GPS, and then it's super accurate. But I've only seen that once.
There's no face tracking or anything available to say, once this object is in the camera, make sure that's always in the same position for the drone.
Go ahead, Stuart, then Courtney, and then Ray.
Yeah, there is object tracking on a lot of the newer ones. If you have a look at Casey Neistat's videos on a couple of the reviews, he shows where the drone would literally follow him as he was jogging through a forest. So that was pretty impressive. But the problem was that the drone that was following him didn't have the collision avoidance sensors and eventually ran into a tree.
Right, there you go. Courtney.
Yeah, that basically was what I was going to say. Most of the consumer grade drones do have facial tracking now. And some of them have collision avoidance, and so I've seen video of people running through a forest and the drone flying at about 10 feet off the ground, following them in and out of trees and things. So it's pretty capable as long as you stay in the frame.
It is not. What I will say is drone usage is not for the faint of heart, and it's not for someone you're going to crash drones. Like you're going to crash your drone, and you just have to kind of be in the mindset that either you're going to get good at repairing it, or you're I lost a lot of them, but I wrote them off when I bought them. It was just like, I know that this isn't going to survive, and I'm going to just learn how to do it. And I'm going to do crazy things with it. I happen to be living on a farm in the middle of nowhere, so I was able to just I had a lot of space, 1,000 acres to work with. So it was a good place to kind of test the stuff. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, I have found that for serious work, rarely does the automatic I never use the automatic tracking except for point of view on a building or something fairly large. But individuals, I do it manually.
Yeah, letting it do automatic anywhere near a actual person would be something that I'd be super worried about. Peter?
I was just going to say that, the published accuracy for commercial grade GPS systems that would fit inside a drone, most drones, is probably somewhere between 1 and 4 meters inside. So it's going to drift.
Mm-hmm.
It's going
and
to
that's why it makes a difference to have, if you're going to do that, you can make it much more accurate, but you need terrestrial based error correction,
or you need access to the last 3 bits of the data.
Right. Well, for the standard person, that's all. All right, next question.
Moving on to John M. Gerard of Berkeley, California. I have an iPad app called Absolute RC Simulator. This allows one to fly all sorts of RC planes, helicopters, quadcopters, drones, and so forth. I use my game controller for the iPad, very realistic. So it's a comment as much as it's a question.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
Moving on to Kevin N. Murphy of Palm Desert, California. Any third-party apps you like for controlling DJI drones? Note Litchi, Drone Deploy, or so forth.
Any other three, third-party apps that you like? I will say Drone Deploy was super easy. Like I downloaded it. You can get a demo for a couple weeks, and then it was just working, and it just took over. And there was a bug for a while where the, Drone Deploy would not get the focus correct on the Mavic, and so you would end up with like 300 photos that were just slightly out of focus, not a lot out of focus, just enough. It was just enough that when you looked at it on your phone, you were like, oh, that looks great, and when you opened it up, it's not great. So, but they fixed that a while ago, and so I like Drone Deploy a lot as far as playing around with it, and getting like big coverage of it. It's amazing if you want to get a map of a campus or a map of a golf course or a map of if you want to build something that's totally photoreal. And the nice thing about it, it's just automatic and you shoot it all at one time. The only thing I'll say about that, and I'm talking a little bit more because we don't have very many questions and we have more time than we have questions now. But one thing that you want to think about when you shoot something like that, when you're doing hundreds of photos for a region, is to pick the middle of the day because the sun doesn't move as much. I wanted it to be picturesque, so I did it in the morning, but by the time it finishes doing it, the sun has changed enough that you have all kinds of other issues. Other things to look for is the perfect time to shoot is a heavy overcast day, is the perfect time to map because you get this great kind of soft light over the whole scene. It's a giant diffuser of atmosphere. The time not to shoot is when there's broken clouds, because you just get weird shadows across the whole thing. Also, sunlight is fine. Like you can definitely get it with bright sunlight as well. It just looks different. But those are things that I would recommend. Go ahead, Keenan.
So one thing I'll tell you guys, when you do the drone deploy, it works really well. Plan for overlap. You need to draw your box bigger than what you think, but plan for that. The other thing, when we do any follow motion, set your altitude height above average terrain. So if I'm doing that where we're going to follow a target, we're at 150. I know there's no trees, there's no cell towers. So I don't like the goggles because you lose the situational awareness of what's around you. You're too focused on the camera's view. So we won't fly them at all. But it's incredible with the drone deploy. Alex, you're right. The stuff is just leaps and bounds and the focus thing was annoying for a while, really annoying.
It was so sad because I went to a couple locations that I can't go back to, and it was like that didn't work out at all. So anyway, next question.
Next question comes from Jason Panks of Nashville, who says, suggestions for a budget-friendly drone for a noob, optional with camera. So budget-friendly.
Go ahead, Keenan.
I'm going to tell everybody to start with a Mavic Mini. They're $300 to $500. They have prop guards. You can fly them in the house. They run off your phone. The nice thing with DJI products, and I don't work for DJI, but the ecosystem of the control surfaces are all the same. So as you upgrade your talent and you want to get a better drone, if you start with a Mavic Mini, go to a Matri or go to a Enterprise Dual, they fly exactly the same. So Mavic Mini, $300 to $500 is that's the bottom I would start.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, for the brand new ones, Mavic Minis. For the secondhand market, a Phantom 2 or Phantom 3 can be got at a really good budget price right now, but just be aware they're not as fully featured as some of the new ones. The changes that have come in the last 5 years are amazing. And if you want to build your own, you can still pick up a DJI F550 or F450 kit, but that is a large quadcopter or the size of hexacopter that wouldn't fit in the camera view.
I will say that I feel like DJI has really kind of cornered this at this point. I've tested a lot of different drones and I've just kind of given up. I don't know if everyone else has or not, but like it just the function and everything else. And the thing is DJI it's not just that it's kind of like Black Magic. It's not just that they are ahead of everyone else. It's that they're super aggressive about staying there. When companies get way far ahead of everyone else, they often slow down. They just kind of, they're cashing in on and it feels like DJI is like at the beginning. It's like Amazon, at the beginning of a hockey stick, and they're just looking at every market they can possibly get into and everything they can apply it to, and then they're spending just incredible amounts of money on R&D and development. And I know that the U.S. government has some issues with them, so that there's other people trying to get into it, but they're pretty far ahead. That's the real challenge. Go ahead, Ray.
I love DJI's design and function, and I agree with you. They're out in front, and I love my equipment. They have one very terrible black spot, unfortunately. I have had 2 experiences with sending my equipment to DJI US for support. I got no support. I sent one controller to them 4 times, and it came back non-working 3 times.
Right.
And I also, well, anyway, my local dealer felt so sorry for me on one occasion. He exchanged the equipment because DJI wouldn't.
Yeah.
I am not impressed with their support. Their products are fantastic.
Yeah. Courtney?
Yeah, I have a Mavic Mini, and a good step up from that, and nobody's mentioned yet, is the Air 2, which is under $1,000 and is quite competent, has a little more collision avoidance and things like that than the Mavic Mini, and it's a good one to graduate to after you have graduated from the Mavic Mini.
Next question.
Next question from Kevin Murphy of Palm Desert, California. And Kevin wonders, what model camera drone are you flying today, Ray? And can you talk through it? Surely more than one, but curious what your go-to model is.
Okay, my main serious machine is the Inspire 2 with the X7 camera. And I have a Mavic Pro as a backup unit that I have. And I have an old Phantom in the backyard, or the back 40 here.
Next question.
Comes from Jason Panks of Nashville again. And Jason says, how did Apple make their drone fly through the walls in a recent Apple event online? Editing magic, it looks seamless.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
My guess is going to be post-production. You fly it through up to one point, and then you do it from the other side, and then you match up your shots in post. That would be my guess. It just feels like, that's how I've done it. Flying through a window that had rain on it, you do it 2 times, and then you do a cross dissolve in post. That's a way.
No, I think that's probably what they did. I don't think they can move the glass. That's there.
Tracking.
So
tracking shots.
Yeah. So, but I think that that's most likely what they did. It's really fun. If you look at the McDubbies again, I did one with my son, falling from a long way down, like the visual effects version of it, where he only has to fly by. This is for TikTok, and but the thing that I found useful is to go backwards from the shot. So you start where you want it to end, and then you fire straight up. Rather than, because then I could have it really go at full speed up, as opposed to coming down at full speed would be dangerous, probably for the drone anyway. So trying to stop was I started playing with that idea, and I was like, yeah, that's not going to work. And so I just did it backwards. And one of the things that we had a lot of trouble with in the past that I haven't gotten around to doing is that powers of 10 shot. I've been wanting to redo that with a drone for a long time, where you get that, the Eames couple did it a long time ago, and we used to call it the powers of 10 shot in visual effects, because someone would want to fly from space all the way down to someone's house. And it was
first time I saw it was National Film Board of Canada's Cosmic Zoom. It was in 61 or something, 1961. Great idea.
And that's where you put little faders in between, and that film
you go through clouds.
1817. That's what was that? The film that was recently done about World War I. 1917.
And 1817 was no World War. So it was. Yeah, there was wars. There's wars.
They're thinking about it. They were trying really hard.
I've been meaning that might be a project that we all take on, is to do a really beautiful drone, get ready to do a really beautiful drone shot to start it off, and then you jump to all the other things. Yeah. Next question.
Race Sky Gleason back in with blades. The shape of the blade seems to change the noise. What and where can I find blades that will tip? That helps make it less noisy. with the tip that makes it helps make it less noisy.
Yeah.
I'll go with Keenan.
So we use a company called Master Air Screw. They have redesigned the Mavic blades. They're $25 for a set. So they're actually cheaper than the Mavic OEM blades. I believe it's masterairscrew.com.
That's great. Next question.
Mickey from the Philippines says, Ray, what would be your recommendations for a good train the wetware? I am going to crash this on day one drone. The less electronic assistance, the better. Well framed question, sir.
I would start, Mickey, with getting one of these simulators. That's by far the best way to save your money. The simulator cost is quite small compared to crashing your drone. So, get the simulator, work with the simulator for a while, then get a drone. And I think the DJI Mini is a good place to start.
What I find funny is that it's actually much harder to fly a really small one, like a $50 one that you might buy on Amazon. And so what's funny is I realized that made me a lot better at it. Like these little ones that are like $15 are really hard to fly because they have these tiny little controllers. And I got good at flying one of those around the house, chasing my kids at the time around with the drone. And then it feels like the Mavic is like a tank. Like it just is, whoa, and it's like big and slow. And so it's the little ones are kind of fun to play with just because it builds up your dexterity of what it, your kind of fast twitch response to it. But it's a different, you do switch, but the Mavic even feels like a giant tank when you're done with like flying ones that are like this big. Sky and then Stuart.
I discovered that the controller itself was critical and that they made it just like a Game Boy or an existing game controller was not lost on me as far as engineering, because they realized people had been doing this virtual concept already. Why retrain people into a new user interface or a new mechanical interface? So
by the way,
the thumbs, where your thumbs go, where your fingers go, the controls underneath, they're all right there in the DJI controller.
By the way, Lego makes one that you can build. So you can build it all in Legos, and then it's a little drone, and you wreck it all the time, and it just falls apart. And then you put it back together. It's actually pretty fun. Every time you crash it, just little pieces of Legos going everywhere, and then you go, oh, okay, and then you put it all back together. It's kind of a good way to kind of build up some skills and hardening your heart against it crashing. Go ahead, Stuart, and then Ray.
Okay, this might start an argument with Keenan and Ray. But the most stable platform for all of these when you're starting off is a coaxial helicopter, where you've got the blades one above the other rotating in opposite directions. They will get you in the air and teach you the basics about flying around indoors. The bigger ones will fly outdoors, but you need a little bit of nose weight, or there's a mod where you can put extra blades on the tail to get more tilt to go forwards. The bad side of them is they don't fly exactly the same as in how they react when they're traveling sideways and you're using the rudder, compared to a quadcopter or compared to a collective pitch helicopter. So you kind of have to retrain, but to just practice and get that same viewpoint that Ray was talking about earlier, especially when the helicopter's coming towards you, getting all of that, it'll teach you the basics, and they are cheap.
Yeah, go ahead. Next question. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ray. Real quick.
Well, he's right. Coaxial helicopters are inherently stable, and there are full-size coaxial helicopters, mostly made in Russia. Any rate, let me introduce, you mentioned different controls and stuff, and now I'll introduce, I hesitate to use the word, but the religious argument in the thing. There are people who fly with their thumbs, and there are people who fly by squeezing the control.
Yes.
Okay.
So are you a squeezer or a thumber?
I'm a thumber because that's how I learned. But you will find people that absolutely insist the only way is to be a squeezer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ray, mode 1 or mode 2?
I'm mode 2.
What's mode 1 or mode 2 for everyone?
Okay. It has to do with how the controls are mapped out as far as left, right, up, down, and so forth. It's the mode 1 is an old airplane mode.
Right. Next question.
That's my T-shirt for the day. Are you a thumber or a squeezer? I'm sorry, that's just funny.
I know.
Just
Are you mode 1 or mode 2?
Yeah.
I like that too. Jesse Jennings is next from Norman, I believe, Oklahoma. Who knows? Active noise cancellation technology always impresses me. I see some academic research that has been done for canceling drone noise. Anyone had any experience trying to do it?
The difficulty is pitch. So getting rid of the pitch is because it's keep on changing the pitch, and so things that are trying to grab onto it, it's not consistent. It's a consistent sound, but it's at a different pitch, and it makes it harder to identify what that is. The most the easiest way to get rid of most of the sound on a drone is a soundtrack. That's what everybody uses. Like it's always funny. It's always funny when you're playing with the original videos, and it's just like bzzz, and then you put some Appalachian Spring or something else over top of it. And it's majestic, and it just it's very dreamy. But then you go back to the original, it's just this high pitched hum. Anyway, next question.
Roscoe Jones, may we dedicate this hour to Hedy Lamarr, who invented speed spectrum radio. God bless you, Hedy.
Spread spectrum,
Spread spectrum. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well done. Next question.
And he notes, I believe she would have joined office hours, and we would have been unbelievably fortunate to have had her.
Yeah, that would have been great. Next question.
Peter Moore has our last regular question here, and he's from Auckland, New Zealand, and says, what's the smallest drone quadcopter available, consumer and pro, with stand, without camera? Oh,
on Amazon, you can get ones that are like $15. When you're talking about small, they're like this big. They're like this big. They're like tiny little drones, and they're very hard to fly. But you wreck them all the time, and then when you finally kill them, when you've wrecked them too many times, and they stop taking off, or they all pull to the right or whatever, you go, that was fun. Go ahead, Stuart.
There's a whole class called Cine Whoop, which are about that sort of size, that are aimed at doing exactly that sort of stuff that Peter has asked about. There is also a version of these that now has ducted fans and what have you. I believe a company to look up would be Shen Drones, and NERC FPV on YouTube will show most of those in use. There is actually a video showing one going from outside of a Japanese school in through a window around kids who are in class, and then down a hallway and whatever. It's part of a music video. It's silly, but it's gorgeous.
Next question. Last question, I think.
And the last question takes us out of drones back into regular production. Michael Peters of Oakton, Virginia says, I'm a vMix user and have a big job I'm speccing out. I'm planning on taking your suggestion, Alex, and getting 8 Mac Minis to ingest into vMix. If I bring 8 Mac Minis into vMix using NDI, will I be able to control the audio of each Mac Mini guest via Dante? And could you give me a list of the hardware and setup?
Dante does not work on an M1 yet. So that's the real issue at the moment. So we're testing the Zoom stuff, but we can't use the M1s yet in our system, specifically because of Dante, because all of our audio I/O is going in and out of. We're using Dells right now that are considerably more expensive than the minis. So we would love to keep on expanding using minis rather than the Dells. I have not. I've been I finally got the B-Link running, but right now it's running my comms, and so I'm now going to get ready to start testing it later this week and early next week as a Zoom engine, just to see. We're going to do a bunch of frame rate tests against the minis and against other computers and everything else. But that's another option as well. I think they're going to work. I think the B-Links are probably going to work there, but we have to test it a whole bunch of different tests to make sure that we feel comfortable with them. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I guess those USB Avio Dante adapters might work in the situation, though that would mean getting a bunch of hardware and the PoE enabled switch.
Yeah, good guy.
Yeah, I mean it'll work. He's going to need 10 gig switches though, because he's going to saturate that gigabit Ethernet pretty quick going into that PC that's running vMix. So you want to keep in mind that for his hardware decisions is 10 gig switches and a 10 gig card or multiple PCIe cards inside of the computer.
Yeah, I don't. I use, I take the HDMI out of the computers and convert them to SDI. So I don't use NDI for that. So I put it into a big router. So that's a different approach for that. And so, yeah, go ahead, Ray, and then Roscoe.
if Ross goes on that topic, I wanted to introduce one last word about safety, particularly. Yeah,
I have a hard out. So Roscoe, answer real quickly. I'm sorry, I gotta go.
Well, that's, my question was: is each and every one of those minis is on a separate Zoom meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're a Zoom. Each one of them is a Zoom room for me. You know, that's how I do them. Yep. Ray, I'm sorry, we just have a hard out. I have to get to a meeting. But thank you so much for coming in. That was great. And I don't think we have a drone section in our. How do we not have a drone section in our thing? So we'll get a drone section up to make sure that Keenan and Ray and all the other folks that are using drones can keep on talking about them and showing off some stuff there. So we'll get that established. We're going to talk about drones a lot more. And
there's a big drone
kind of
about to launch down in Texas today, maybe.
Yeah. We haven't even talked about the fact. I want to bring somebody on talking about people drones. That's the next thing. That's the next big thing. All right, we're going to jump into the post show and continue this conversation. All right, thanks everybody.